He was the king of martial arts films, a graceful, magnetic performer destined to become a Hollywood superstar. Sadly, Bruce Lee did not live long enough to see his destiny fulfilled. I'm Peter Graves, and this is Biography. In 1969, Bruce Lee wrote a note to himself predicting he would become the highest-paid Oriental superstar in the U.S., and that by 1970 he would achieve world fame. Well, by 1970, Bruce Lee's action-packed kung fu films had made him famous throughout much of the world. But it wasn't until his sudden death in 1973 that American audiences discovered him. Since then, Bruce Lee has become an icon. His films have exploded in popularity, and martial arts academies across the country are filled with kids and grown-ups who want to learn to be like Bruce Lee. But even more remarkable than Bruce Lee's enduring popularity are the number of myths surrounding his life and death. In this hour, we'll try to sort them out. Join us as Biography presents the life of martial arts master and movie star, Bruce Lee.
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee.
What is this thing you do?
It's a Chinese form called Kung Fu.
Kung Fu is Kung Fu. It's not child's play.
Bruce Lee to Kung Fu is John Wayne to Westerns, is Baryshnikov or Nureyev to ballet, is Michael Jordan to basketball.
I mean, you gotta put the whole hip into it and snap it.
The year is 1971, the city Hong Kong, and the martial artist Bruce Lee is already a hero in this city of 4 million. He's about to become a box office sensation throughout the world.
There are a lot of martial artists that come close to where Bruce was physically, using his techniques and everything. But I haven't seen anybody take Bruce's techniques any further.
Bruce Lee has already been. He's the standard that everybody has to adhere to. He's the one that made them all want to be martial artists.
I wouldn't if I were you.
No matter how good any other martial artist is, no one has had the ability to combine filmmaking savvy, emotional power, and precision that Bruce Lee embodied.
How do you like that?
I never thought he would get as famous as he did, because to me he was Sifu Bruce Lee, my instructor, and I wanted the knowledge he had, not only in martial art, but in life in general.
Martial art has a very, very deep meaning as far as my life is concerned, because as an actor, as a martial artist, as a human being, all these I have learned from martial art.
Bruce Lee was born in 1940 in San Francisco, where his actor father and his mother happened to be touring with a Hong Kong opera company. The Lee family soon returned to Hong Kong, where this gag photo shows how early his father was pushing an acting career for Bruce. And Bruce would go on to star in more than a dozen movies as a child.
The kind of roles that Bruce Lee played in these movies was always the rebel, the street kid, the wisecracker. He was great at pouting. He was great at showing big emotions, anger, sadness.
A dubbed film shows him in one of his little tough guy roles.
What are you doing here?
I came here to beat you up, you old bully. Now I'll kill you.
His on-screen role of tough guy matched his off-screen life. He was a hell-raising teenager in frequent fights on the rough and tumble streets of Hong Kong, where he hung out with his friends. The martial arts take discipline, so Bruce's parents were happy to pay for his training with Yip Man, a renowned teacher of Kung Fu, or Gung Fu in Cantonese. All Gung Fu combines hand-to-hand combat with spiritual training. Wing Chun, the style Bruce studied, followed the movements of animals. Ever the smooth mover, Bruce took his grace to the dance floor as well, becoming the Cha-Cha champion of Hong Kong in 1958. In 1959, Bruce returned to the place of his birth, America, leaving his troublemaking days in Hong Kong behind. In Seattle, a family friend named Ruby Chow put him to work in her restaurant. The intensity Bruce brought to improving his martial arts skills, he also brought to a study of just about everything else. And he attended the University of Washington to study philosophy. There he met and admired high school student Linda Emery.
I first saw Bruce Lee when I was a senior in high school. And he would come to my high school because he was a friend of the philosophy teacher. And he would give guest lectures on Chinese philosophy. And we would all see Bruce Lee down at the end of the hall. And all of us girls would go, ooh, you know, Bruce Lee is here, that guy, he's here, you know. And we all thought he was so cute and everything. And that summer, I went down to Chinatown and we took Kung Fu lessons. I mean, this was like the most foreign thing I had ever done.
Bruce led trips to Chinese restaurants and movies after class.
But I must say I was shocked when he first asked me out on a date. And when he did ask me out to go to the Space Needle for dinner. And I was so amazed. I said, you mean everybody is going to go to the Space Needle? And he said, no, just you. And I was like, oh. So that was the beginning.
And 1 year later, in 1964, Bruce Lee and Linda Emery married.
Back in those days, marrying someone outside of your race was just not done. But it was just one of those times in your life that happens very rarely when you know absolutely you are doing the right thing.
That same year, Bruce opened a Kung Fu school in Oakland, California. Bruce's teaching was unique, combining elements of several Kung Fu styles.
I felt that the people came to him because he had something to offer that was different, and it was revolutionary at that time period.
There was more than a little skepticism about this young man who'd been schooled in one style of Kung Fu for just 5 years.
And so people thought, God, what an arrogant guy to change the ways of the masters that were 100 years before his time. But he was saying no, because everything evolves.
So even as he was winning fans with his new methods, he was making enemies as well. And some of these enemies were perfectly willing to challenge him in the coming years. Biography's look at Bruce Lee will continue in a moment. His biography returns to the life of Bruce Lee. The mid-1960s, Bruce Lee had opened a Kung Fu school in Oakland where he was teaching his innovative techniques.
Well, Kung Fu is originated in China. It is the ancestor of karate and jiu-jitsu. It's more of a complete system and it's more fluid.
Bruce was willing to teach anyone interested in Kung Fu.
He totally refused to get into the whole Chinese practice of only teaching Chinese. He taught everybody, and he learned from everybody. He learned from American boxing, fencing, wrestling, judo, and other grappling techniques.
The teaching of non-Chinese students angered the Chinese martial arts establishment. It was just like a movie. One of their guys came to Bruce's school and challenged him to a fight. If Bruce was defeated, the school would have to close.
I was there, and the fight ensued, and it was a no-holds-barred fight, and it took 3 minutes, and Bruce got this man down on the ground and said, "Do you give up? Do you give up?" in Chinese, and he said, "I give up," and those guys left. But this incident was very significant in his life. It was a turning point. He thought 3 minutes was far too long, and felt that his techniques were not as effective as he would want them to be.
Bruce was energized by the difficulty of his victory. Now he took to building himself up and sharpening his techniques for long hours every day.
It was at that point that he began to develop what would eventually become his way of martial arts, Jeet Kune Do.
Jeet Kune Do, or the way of the intercepting fist, was the name Bruce gave to his evolving method of fighting. He drew detailed studies of the human body, illustrating moves that were more fluid, less stylized, and more practical than the classic techniques of the East.
See, he illustrated everything. He's very good because when he taught, he tried to use every different aspect that he could. He wanted to find the essence of different martial art, whether it was Japanese system or Chinese or Korean or Okinawan system or Indonesian or Thai. And he believed that every culture had something to offer.
In this rare footage of a 1964 demonstration of his techniques in Long Beach, California, Bruce's ability to mesmerize an audience with his flamboyant feats and quiet authority is clear. This event brought Bruce his first big break. His performance here came to the attention of the producer of television's Batman series, William Dozier. Dozier then arranged for a screen test for Bruce.
Test X1. Take
My last name is Lee, Bruce Lee. I was born in San Francisco in 1940. I'm 24 right now.
And you worked in motion pictures in Hong Kong?
Yes, since I was around 6 years old.
Test X2, take 2.
This screen test was rediscovered a short time ago, 30 years after it was made.
Well, Kung Fu can be practiced alone or with a partner. Practicing alone, they involve forms. Some imitate a crane, a monkey, a praying mantis. This is a crane form. Start off.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bruce began to work with Hollywood notables like Dean Martin and privately trained celebrities like Steve McQueen, who would become a close friend, and UCLA basketball star Lou Alcindor, now Kareem Abdul-Jabbar.
Bruce liked to vary his workout. Some days he would do a lot of cardiovascular and running. We'd work on the heavy bag. We'd work on hand techniques. Sometimes we'd break boards. There were a number of different things that Bruce did.
Old home movies show Kareem working out in Bruce's backyard.
Okay.
Actor James Coburn was another student who became a close friend as he trained with Bruce.
It was all play, you know, it was very serious play. That was one of the things he says, play seriously.
No, Jim.
Yeah.
Get your attitude, mental attitude, completely away from the previous one. And just like a beginner, you want to look at the bag and want to experiment. Ah, you see that? Man, I see some fire with you in there.
I was never very athletic. He brought everything of mine particular. So it brought it in, gave me a center to work from.
Beautiful. Let's see it.
Trained so intensely. All of his muscles were absolutely functional. They would move and they would respond and they were quick. His skin was like velvet. It was so smooth and we could see every muscle in his body.
Okay, now let's run it back and see what happens.
Bruce's central quality, the quality that really that was the foundation for his success, I think, was his determination. He was just determined to do everything at the highest level, and he had the patience to find out how to get himself at that level.
Bruce's home life took a new turn with the birth of his son Brandon in 1965. Bruce adored the boy, whom he described to his mother as the only blonde-haired, gray-eyed Chinaman in the world.
He just was so delighted when Brandon was born, because, you know, a Chinese man has to have his boy. And he was so proud of Brandon and just loved it and loved playing with him and everything. He was just delighted. And then when I was pregnant with Shannon, he he was hoping it might be another boy because more boys are better, you know, in Chinese thinking. And so Shannon was born, and she was a girl. And you would have thought an angel came to live at our house. She just had him around her little finger. They were a perfect balance between Brandon was a strong boy-type child, and Shannon was a delicate female child, and they were the focus of his life.
With two-finger push-ups, Bruce displayed his phenomenal strength. But he disliked such crowd-pleasing stunts, preferring serious demonstrations of his techniques, which highlighted the difference, for example, between standard punches and his one-inch punch, a powerful blow delivered at close range.
The reason for the one-inch punch and the three-inch punch is that you have to be able to generate power. And so the method that he trained us with, I'll just do it easy. See, instead of punching from here, see, it had to be from here. This hurts. If you're on the receiving end, you will see it will penetrate all the way to the sternum. Before aerobic dancing was in vogue, before aerobic dancing became very popular, he was already doing something like aerobic dancing because we would train to music.
Now listen to the beat and listen to my movement, okay? Now, relate to me now. Move, no.
You know, he loved dancing. He thought he could teach Nureyev to be a great martial artist because he had all of those moves and those high kicks and the flying in the air. You know, he said ballet dancers could really be powerful because they already had the equipment.
Bruce's adaptations of the elegant techniques of dance became more pronounced in his films like The Chinese Connection, but simplicity was always the goal.
It is easy for me to put on a show and be cocky and then feel like pretty cool and all that. Or I can make all kinds of phony things, you see what I mean? Blinded by it. Or I can show you some really fancy movement. But really, to me, okay, to me, ultimately, martial art means honestly expressing yourself.
Thanks to a screen test, Bruce Lee would soon get a chance to express himself to a considerably wider audience.
I am Bruce Lee, inviting you to join me every Friday night on most of these ABC stations.
Biography's look at Bruce Lee will continue in a moment. A&E's biography returns to the life of Bruce Lee. In 1966, Bruce Lee won the role of Kato, the Chinese manservant to the crime-fighting Green Hornet, in a cartoon-like series aimed at young audiences. It was far from a serious look at the martial arts, but it did give him national exposure for the first time.
Kato?
Yeah?
Talk to Mary Chang. See if she knows where Jimmy Key might be hiding.
Okay.
No ordinary manservant, Kato knew Kung Fu.
You know, if we ever meet up with that masked Kung Fu man again, I want him.
Most of the attention that he got from doing the Green Hornet really was from kids. Those of us who appreciate martial arts would watch it just to see Bruce do his thing.
He was paid $400 a week, gross, $313 take home. And we thought that was the most money in the world. We thought that was just great.
Still, Bruce bristled at the role he was being asked to play, a traditional one in Hollywood for an Asian, respectful servant to a white employer.
There's a little cake for you.
Never afraid to speak his mind, he wrote a letter to producer William Dozier in which he called for more action and dialogue for Kato, an active partnership with the Green Hornet.
I think Bruce worried more about being shown as a servant, which we talked about, and I didn't want any more than he did. He was my equal.
every kid, I believe, in America noticed that that guy behind the Green Hornet, the one who could kick, the one who could punch, the one who could move so amazingly, all eyes centered on him.
I'll kill him as I would a fly. Enough!
The makers of the Green Hornet had to actively restrain Bruce Lee from being himself, because they realized every time they saw the rushes that everything else was wiped off the screen.
With great fanfare, the two stars of the Green Hornet met the press. The show's producers hoped to rub some of the luster of the Batman series onto the Green Hornet by pairing the stars of the two shows at the event. First, though, the press met Bruce Lee.
Well, I'll say it the Chinese way. 多謝晒. Thank you very much.
Aikido uses a form of karate.
Yes, it's a Chinese form called Gung Fu. I made the mistake of sneezing when I was too close to him, and I ended up flat on the floor. He's very fast, very fast.
Sir, would you... Faster than Robin?
Faster than Robin. Faster than a speeding bullet. No,
I
that's
doubt
the wrong-
that very much.
That's the wrong way.
To boost the sagging ratings for the Green Hornet, a much-hyped face-off with Batman and Robin was staged in Gotham City.
I wonder. But there was a small niche between the gum applier and the perforating needles.
And we are both quite flexible.
I never will forget when that thing came out. They wanted to try to get some of Batman's audience to watch the Green Hornet. So they thought, okay, we'll put them on there and make it and that's what it's become known as, is the crossover. But Burt Ward was absolutely petrified when he was going to work with him, and he didn't want to work with him. And Bruce got the script, and in the original script, he lost to Robin. Well, that didn't go over too good with Bruce. He walked off the show. He said, I'm not going to do that. He said, there's no way that anybody would believe I would get in there and fight Robin and lose.
It's a good thing those guys aren't in town every week.
Even then, before I even knew about Kung Fu and Bruce Lee, I was laughing when it was Robin versus Kato. It was so obvious that Robin would have been wiped, would have been a smudge on the carpet within 5 seconds.
Rather than risk offending any egos, the producers called it a draw.
What do we have here? A Mexican standoff? A dead heat?
Of course, the Green Hornet was canceled. And then between 1966 and 1971, it was hard times.
It galled Bruce that America seemed so unready to accept a Chinese leading man, but he took advantage of the hard times to start his son Brandon down the martial arts path.
When Brandon was very young, from the time he could walk, Bruce was showing him kung fu moves, and they would practice together all the time.
From the time Brandon was this high, he had muscles, and he looked like a midget Bruce. And I thought, my God, when he grows up, he's going to be one of these dynamos. And he turned out to be a really sweet man. I liked Brandon a lot.
I was about 5, and we went on a talk show in Hong Kong, which was right about the time my dad's career was really taking off. And this was a real big talk show in Hong Kong, and my dad brought me out and had me break a board. Talk about pressure, you know. You're Bruce Lee's son. You're going to go on a talk show in Hong Kong and break a board. What if you don't break the board? Can you imagine, you know?
Brandon did, of course, break the board. But even as Brandon and his father were delighting audiences in Hong Kong, things were beginning to happen for Bruce back in Hollywood. In 1971, Bruce's student, Sterling Siliphant, wrote the premiere episode of the series Longstreet around Bruce's martial arts theories.
The title of that particular episode of Longstreet is called The Way of the Intercepting Fist. Now, I think the successful ingredient in it was because I was being Bruce Lee.
Yourself?
Myself, right.
What is this thing you do?
In Cantonese, Jeet Kune Do. the way of the intercepting fist.
Intercepting fist, huh?
Or foot. Come on, touch me. Any way you can. You see? To reach me, you must move to me. Your attack offers me an opportunity to intercept you. In this case, I'm using my longest weapon, my sidekick, against the nearest target, your kneecap. This can be compared to your left jab in boxing, except it's much more damaging.
I see.
I think in the martial art that he performed on the screen, he was into what I call the soul. His emotion was into it. And I think that's what people recognized and liked about him.
There were some lines that expressed your philosophy. I don't know if you remember them or not.
I remember that. I
Let's
said,
hear.
this is what it is, okay?
You're talking to Longstreet, played by James Francesca.
I said, empty your mind. Be formless, shapeless, like water. Now, you put water into a cup, it becomes the cup. Put it into a teapot, it becomes the teapot. Now, water can flow or creep or drip or crash. Be water, my friend. Like that, you see?
Yeah, I see. I get the idea.
Films that eventually would make him a superstar. Biography returns to the life of Bruce Lee.
Mr. Marlowe?
Yes?
In the 1969 film Marlowe, in one of his few Hollywood roles after The Green Hornet, Bruce Lee showed why it was never a good idea to displease him. The fact is, Asian actors got little work in the Hollywood of 1970. But what really stung was to be denied a part he had helped develop. The problem was not his ability, it was his race. Hollywood's perfect Oriental Kung Fu master? The Caucasian actor David Carradine.
The Way of the Tiger, The Sign of the Dragon, Kung Fu.
Kung Fu, the television show, had been designed for Bruce Lee, had been written for Bruce Lee. Everything about that show screamed Bruce Lee, and he was not allowed to do it.
People can't look beyond the end of their nose here a lot of times, and I think that's what happened. You know, here they had a potential huge star, and nobody really recognized him.
But to give up was unthinkable for Bruce. In fact, he wrote a pledge to himself entitled, My Definite Chief Aim. I, Bruce Lee, he wrote, will be the highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. He pushed himself even harder now, determined to succeed in Hollywood, and as he put it, achieve inner harmony and happiness.
In 1970, he took a trip over to Hong Kong. It was more or less just a trip to visit. And Bruce discovered something he hadn't known before, that the Green Hornet TV series had played over there in Hong Kong. And over there they called it the Kato Show. And he was the star. And it was like a hometown boy makes good.
Bruce became a much sought-after guest on Hong Kong television shows. And Bruce's obvious popularity in Hong Kong led directly to an offer from local film mogul Raymond Chow. Chow signed Bruce to a $15,000 two-picture deal in 1971, and now the Lee family would have to pull up stakes in America and settle down in Hong Kong for a while. The picture that Chow chose to launch Bruce toward stardom would be a traditional martial arts film.
Fist of Fury was a classic Hong Kong story of a young country bumpkin, and he goes to this town and goes to work for this ice factory, and of course all the bosses are unbelievably corrupt, take enormous advantage of the workers, and to make matters worse, push drugs.
Badly dubbed, unsophisticated by Western standards, the film nonetheless gave Bruce a chance to dazzle his fans.
Now, you get out of here. I'm warning you. You bastards can't push us around. You want to fight? I'll take you on.
It was Bruce as his fans loved him, fighting for the underdog.
Say, I didn't know Chen was such a tough guy. He's great.
So we attended the midnight premiere and kind of clutching the seats and wondering how it was going to be. And when it was over, the audience was perfectly quiet. And then all of a sudden, they just erupted with cheering and yelling and turning to see where he was, and it was a truly high moment in his life.
The film broke box office records in Hong Kong and then all over Asia and beyond. Bruce grew to dislike Fists of Fury director Lo Wei, but like their counterparts in Hollywood, Hong Kong filmmakers don't argue with success. So in 1972, Bruce again was teamed with Lo Wei for another film.
The big moment in the movie, and probably the biggest moment in Hong Kong cinema history, is when Bruce Lee broke the famous historical sign that the occupying Japanese had put on a Chinese park. No dogs or Chinese allowed.
Hey, you. Come here. You were wanting to get in here. No. Tell you what. There's only one thing you need to do. Pretend you're a dog, and I'll take you in.
I've been told by people who were in the audience in Hong Kong that they had never felt a moment like that in all of Hong Kong cinema history. The whole country just sort of went nuts at the same time. And at that moment, he became a deity to the Hong Kong people.
You came back to Hong Kong, and suddenly, on the strength of one picture, you become a superstar. Everybody knows you. You have to change your phone number. You get mobbed in the streets.
Well, let me say on oneself as an actor, man. I mean, you would be very pleased if somebody say, hey, man, you are a super actor.
All the heroes prior to Bruce Lee, they weren't real martial artists. All these heroes delved into this technique that we call swingy arm. They just threw their arms around. Bruce Lee showed up and he did it. He was a real martial artist.
Tired of working for Raymond Chow, Bruce now demanded a full partnership, and Bruce would direct Return of the Dragon, also known as The Way of the Dragon.
My favorite film of Bruce's is The Way of the Dragon, not because it's the best story or because it's the best production quality, but because it was Bruce's baby from beginning to end, and there is so much of the real Bruce in that movie.
We'll show him Chinese boxing. Yeah, Chinese boxing, yeah.
The film delighted Chinese audiences because it showed the defeat of arrogant Westerners. It also gave Bruce a chance to have some fun showing off, exaggerating the movements of Kung Fu.
Movement number 4. Dragon seeks path. Dragon whips his tail.
Return of the Dragon is a good first film by a fledgling director. It had humor, it had emotion, and of course it had great martial arts.
It also had Chuck Norris, American karate champion and one of Bruce Lee's friends. Their climactic fight scene in the Colosseum in Rome is the most famous matchup in any martial arts film. This is one of the most realistic kung fu fight scenes ever filmed. And maybe the reports were true that the two fighters were actually making contact with each other. Intimidating to any opponent of Bruce's was his high-pitched ki, the sound that accompanied every punch.
Each punch had a voice, and he would give each one his unique sound that came out, and that was that pow. It's like freeing yourself of the energy that you build up, the ki force that you build up inside when you're doing this stuff.
The astounding success of Bruce Lee's first 3 films did not go unnoticed in Hollywood. And Bruce would soon get the call he'd waited for. He'd get to make a martial arts film on a Hollywood budget for an American audience. Good news, but the problems had only begun. A look at the artistry of Bruce Lee, Enter the Dragon, when biography continues. Biography returns to the life of Bruce Lee. In 1972, after 3 box office hits, Bruce Lee shot several test scenes for Game of Death and asked an old student to appear. The fiercest opponent in a series of kung fu confrontations would be Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Kareem was 7'2", Bruce was 5'7". Game of Death was Bruce's 4th film in just 2 years. He was exhausted and the Hong Kong heat was intense.
The soundstage was not air-conditioned. We shot it in Hong Kong in like late August, early September. So that was a problem. Plus he had to act and he had to direct and he had to check out the choreography. And that wears on you.
In May of 1973, Bruce collapsed in a Hong Kong film studio. At the hospital, no clear diagnosis was made. Whatever the cause, Bruce recovered quickly and soon returned to work. Bruce never finished Game of Death. Shortly before his collapse, he had gotten a call from Hollywood to star in Enter the Dragon, a big-budget kung fu film. As shooting began in Hong Kong, Bruce understood that this was finally his shot at stardom in America.
Bruce expected that Enter the Dragon to do very well because it was exactly the way he wanted to do a martial arts film, and it featured him in the way that showed him off to the most spectacular.
Although this time he wasn't directing, Bruce choreographed the highly complex fight scenes in the film.
Under this drive for perfection, Lee and the other actors put in over 12 hours of work to recreate a single kung fu sequence.
He was so pleased with the way Enter the Dragon was done and how it came out. He was, however, unable to enjoy that success.
In July of 1973, while working on a script in a co-star's apartment, Bruce collapses again. He's rushed to the hospital. The worried family soon gathers. Rumors are flying. Is he alive? Everyone waits for a word. And the worst words come. Bruce Lee is dead. Family and friends are stunned. It's impossible, and it's true. On July 25th, the funeral was held in Hong Kong. It was like the death of a national leader. The streets along the funeral route were mobbed with the grieving and the curious. And outside the funeral parlor, the eyes of all the disbelieving fans were on Bruce's family.
The funeral in Hong Kong, you know, was just unbelievable. Of course, I was not in position to know what was going on in public because they just shuffled me to the funeral home and told me what I was supposed to do and all that. I think I was probably numb most of the time.
At the funeral parlor, the mourners passed by to see Bruce one last time. As Linda left for Seattle, she was besieged by reporters. What or who had killed Bruce Lee? Speculation ranged from drugs to the Chinese mafia to foul play by the bosses of rival Hong Kong studios. The inquest offered a reasonable explanation, but many still found Bruce's death suspicious and bizarre.
The speculation that surrounds Bruce's death, it always devastates me because it is such a focus of people's curiosity. I mean, of course, here this perfectly physically fit young man of 32 all of a sudden dies, and there is no external reason that's visible. He wasn't in a car accident. He didn't fall out of a building or anything like that.
On the day he lapsed into a coma, Bruce had taken a painkiller for a headache.
They determined that there was an ingredient in that tablet called meprobamate to which he was hypersensitive, much as a person who might be allergic to penicillin or to a bee sting. And what happens then is the fluid on the brain begins to expand. It's called cerebral edema. The fluid presses on the brain, person goes into a coma, and they die. And that is what happened to Bruce.
Back in Seattle, a second funeral was held, this one small and private.
I decided that I wanted him to be buried in Seattle, and it's so peaceful where he is, and I think that he would have been pleased by that decision.
Bruce's pallbearers included his old friends and students, Dan Inosanto, James Coburn, and Steve McQueen.
Thank you. May peace be with you.
Three weeks after his death, Enter the Dragon opened to huge audiences. The film made more than $10 million in its first month in America.
Of course, boom. As soon as it got into the theaters, it was a big Saturday matinee picture. Kids loved it, the parents enjoyed it, and everybody was just flabbergasted by this powerhouse, Bruce Lee. And it's a perennial. I mean, Bruce, this is the heart and soul of the genre. Enter the Dragon is it.
Warner Brothers presents Enter the Dragon. Starring Black Belt Hall of Fame, undisputed martial arts champion, and international film star Bruce Lee.
Everybody was kung fu fighting.
Bruce Lee's popularity led directly to an explosion of interest in the martial arts.
In fact, it was a little bit frightening.
Everywhere there were imitation Bruces. And today, more than 20 years after his death, say Kung Fu or karate, and people still think Bruce Lee. And untold numbers of Kung Fu films were released. Some were well-made, most were remarkably cheesy, and the never-ending search continued for a true successor to Bruce Lee. One possible successor was Bruce's own son, Brandon, who followed his father into martial arts films. After such movies as Rapid Fire and Showdown in Little Tokyo, Brandon Lee's career was prospering. And then it ended, like his father's, early and tragically. In March of 1993, on the set of the film The Crow, Brandon Lee was shot and killed in a firearms accident. Brandon's untimely death 20 years after his father's led some to speculate that fate has a cruel hold on the Lee family.
What happened to Brandon was purely accidental. I mean, in a million jillion years, you could not have planned the sequence of events that led up to Brandon's death. But I'm just hoping that this kind of talk kind of dies out. You know, that talk about the curse of the Lee family, the connection between Brandon and Bruce. And I think it makes a good story, a good headline, you know, and people are bound to play upon that. And it's very tragic.
Less than a month after Brandon's death, a campaign led by his sister Shannon to memorialize their father ended successfully when a star honoring Bruce Lee was placed on Hollywood Boulevard. Hollywood had finally accepted Bruce Lee as one of its own.
We proudly welcome to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, Bruce Lee.
And I think finally it took 20 years for Hollywood to realize that he really made a big impact on a lot of people.
He wanted to be an Asian person that could make a great action movie and have everybody appreciate the Asian martial arts and not really be worried about what color the star was.
He was a good teacher. I loved him a lot. He gave me a lot of things. I'm just sorry we couldn't have shared more, that's all.
"20 years after his mysterious death, Bruce Lee is still the only Asian ever to become a Hollywood superstar. But Bruce always considered himself a martial artist first and an actor second. A charismatic kung fu innovator, he did more to bring the martial arts to the attention of the American public than any other figure. I'm Peter Graves for A&E. Until next time on Biography.